How to stop deceiving yourself and start living for yourself. Deceiving ourselves is a subtle yet pervasive habit that can prevent us from living authentically and fulfilling our true potential. It often manifests as denial, rationalization, or clinging to comforting illusions about our lives, relationships, or goals. Breaking free from self-deception requires courage, self-awareness, and a commitment to embracing reality, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. By taking intentional steps to stop deceiving yourself, you can start living a life aligned with your true desires and values. This essay explores practical strategies to overcome self-deception and embrace a life of authenticity and purpose. Recognize the signs of self-deception. The first step to stopping self-deception is recognizing when it's happening. Self-deception often arises when we avoid uncomfortable truths or create narratives to protect our ego. Common signs include making excuses for unfulfilling situations, ignoring red flags in relationships, or convincing yourself that you're fine when you're not. For example, you might tell yourself that staying in a toxic job or relationship is necessary because it's not that bad, or things will get better, even when evidence suggests otherwise. To identify self-deception, practice self-reflection. Set aside time to journal or meditate, asking yourself questions like, what am I avoiding? What stories am I telling myself that might not be true? Pay attention to moments of discomfort or defensiveness. These are often clues that you're shielding yourself from reality. Acknowledging these patterns without judgment lays the groundwork for change. Embrace radical honesty. Once you've identified self-deception, the next step is to embrace radical honesty. This means facing the truth about your feelings, circumstances, and aspirations, even when it's painful. Radical honesty requires you to stop sugarcoating your reality and confront difficult questions. Are you truly happy in your career? Are your relationships mutually supportive? Are you pursuing goals that reflect your values? Or are you chasing someone else's definition of success? Start by having honest conversations with yourself. Write down your thoughts without censoring them, or speak them aloud to a trusted friend or therapist. For instance, if you've been telling yourself you're content in a job that drains you, admit that it's not serving you. This honesty can be uncomfortable, but it's liberating. It allows you to see your life clearly and make decisions from a place of truth. Align your actions with your values. Living for yourself means aligning your actions with your core values and desires, rather than external expectations or societal pressures. Self-deception often stems from living a life dictated by others, whether it's pursuing a career to please your parents or staying in a relationship to avoid loneliness. To break this cycle, take time to clarify what matters most to you. Ask yourself, what brings me joy? What legacy do I want to leave? What would I do if fear or judgment weren't factors? Once you've identified your values, such as creativity, freedom, or connection, evaluate whether your current choices reflect them. If they don't, take small, intentional steps to realign. For example, if you value creativity but spend your days in a monotonous job, explore hobbies or side projects that nurture your creative side. Over time, these small actions build a life that feels authentic and fulfilling. Let go of external validation. A major driver of self-deception is the desire for external validation. Many of us mold our lives to fit others' expectations, convincing ourselves that their approval equals happiness. However, living for others' approval often leads to resentment and a loss of self. To stop this, shift your focus inward. Instead of asking, what will others think? Ask, what do I need to feel whole? Letting go of external validation requires setting boundaries and embracing discomfort. For instance, if you've been staying in a situation to avoid disappointing someone, practice saying no or expressing your true needs. Surround yourself with people who support your authentic self, not those who pressure you to conform. Over time, you'll find that living for yourself brings a deeper sense of peace than external praise ever could. Take responsibility for your choices. Self-deception often involves blaming external circumstances for our dissatisfaction, whether it's a demanding boss, a difficult partner, or a lack of opportunities. While external factors can influence your life, taking responsibility for your choices empowers you to create change. Acknowledge that you always have a choice, even if it's a difficult one. For example, you may not control your work environment, but you can choose how you respond, whether by setting boundaries, seeking a new job, or reframing your mindset. Start by identifying one area of your life where you feel stuck. Ask, what's one action I can take to move forward? It could be as simple as updating your resume or having an honest conversation. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself. It means recognizing your power to shape your future. Cultivate self-compassion. Breaking free from self-deception can be challenging, and it's easy to fall into self-criticism when you uncover uncomfortable truths. Counter this by cultivating self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a dear friend. Acknowledge that self-deception often stems from a desire to protect yourself, and that's okay. What matters is your willingness to grow. Practice self-compassion by celebrating small victories and forgiving yourself for past mistakes. For example, if you realize you've been deceiving yourself about a failing relationship, don't dwell on regret. Instead, praise yourself for having the courage to face the truth. Self-compassion creates a safe space to explore your authentic self without fear of judgment. Take action and embrace change. Ultimately, stopping self-deception and living for yourself requires action. Knowledge and reflection are important, but without action, they remain theoretical. Start with small, manageable steps that move you toward your authentic life. If you've been deceiving yourself about your health, commit to a daily walk or a healthier diet. If you've been ignoring your passion for writing, set aside 10 minutes a day to write. These actions build momentum and reinforce your commitment to living authentically. Embrace change as a natural part of this process. Letting go of self-deception often means letting go of old habits, relationships, or identities. While this can feel unsettling, it opens the door to a life that truly reflects who you are. Trust that each step forward, no matter how small, is a step toward a more fulfilling existence. Conclusion: stopping self-deception and starting to live for yourself is a transformative journey that requires courage, honesty, and action. By recognizing the signs of self-deception, embracing radical honesty, aligning your actions with your values, letting go of external validation, taking responsibility, cultivating self-compassion, and embracing change, you can break free from illusions and create a life that's true to you. This process isn't always easy, but it's worth it because living authentically is the ultimate act of self-love and empowerment. Start today with one honest step and watch your life transform into one that reflects your deepest truths and desires. Self-deception is a subtle and pervasive force, a silent saboteur that keeps us from living authentically. It's the comforting lie we tell ourselves to avoid confronting a difficult truth, the job we hate but claim to love, the unhealthy relationship we justify, or the dreams we abandon under the guise of practicality. While it may offer temporary relief, this continuous act of dishonesty creates a chasm between who we are and who we pretend to be. To truly live for yourself, you must first have the courage to stop deceiving yourself. This journey is not about radical change overnight, but a gradual process of conscious awareness, honest reflection, and deliberate action. The first step in this process is to acknowledge the lies you tell yourself. This requires a level of brutal honesty that can be uncomfortable, but it is a necessary foundation. Start by observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Why do you constantly feel drained after work? What is the real reason you avoid certain social situations? Often, our self-deceptions are rooted in fear of failure, fear of judgment, or fear of being alone. By identifying these fears, we can begin to understand the motivations behind our dishonesty. For example, you might realize you've convinced yourself that a certain career path is the only one for you because you're afraid of the uncertainty that comes with trying something new. Unmasking these lies is the first step toward reclaiming your personal narrative. Once you have identified your self-deceptions, the next step is to confront the truths they hide. This is where living for yourself truly begins. This doesn't mean you have to quit your job or leave a relationship immediately. Instead, it means you must start taking small, intentional steps that align with your true self. If you've been deceiving yourself about your passion for a hobby, dedicate time each week to that hobby. If you've been pretending to be someone you're not in a social circle, practice expressing your genuine opinions and interests, even if it feels awkward at first. These small acts of authenticity are like building blocks. each one reinforcing your commitment to yourself and eroding the need for deception. The final and most crucial step is to consistently choose authenticity over comfort. Living for yourself means making decisions based on your values, your desires, and your well-being, not on what you think others expect of you. It's about recognizing that your life is a story you are writing, and you have the power to change its direction at any time. This newfound freedom comes with a sense of responsibility and can be challenging, but the reward is a life filled with purpose and genuine joy. The truth may be difficult at first, but it is ultimately what sets you free. When you stop deceiving yourself, you create space to live a life that is truly and unapologetically yours. Self-deception is perhaps one of the most pervasive yet invisible barriers to authentic living. We construct elaborate mental narratives to protect ourselves from uncomfortable truths, maintain relationships that drain us, and pursue goals that belong to others rather than ourselves. Breaking free from these patterns requires both courage and practical strategies for recognizing when we're lying to ourselves and why. Recognizing the masks we wear. Self-deception often begins as a survival mechanism. We learn early to suppress inconvenient feelings, deny obvious patterns, and rationalize choices that don't align with our deeper values. The person who stays in a dead-end job because it's stable while ignoring their growing resentment. The individual who maintains toxic friendships because they fear loneliness more than they value their peace. The chronic people pleaser who convinces themselves that saying yes to everything makes them valuable. These patterns persist because they offer short-term relief from anxiety, conflict, or uncertainty. But they exact a heavy toll, a growing sense of disconnection from our authentic selves and a life that feels more performed than lived. The uncomfortable truth about comfort zones. Living authentically requires accepting that discomfort is not the enemy of a good life. It's often the gateway to one. We deceive ourselves when we mistake familiarity for happiness, when we choose the devil we know over the uncertainty of growth. The parent who sacrifices their dreams for the children while secretly resenting the choice. The artist who takes the corporate job temporarily and finds themselves still there a decade later. These aren't necessarily wrong choices, but they become self-deceptive when we refuse to acknowledge their true cost or our agency in making them. Authentic living means owning our decisions fully, including the trade-offs they entail. The practice of radical honesty. Breaking free from self-deception starts with developing what might be called internal truthfulness, the willingness to see ourselves and our situations clearly, even when the view is uncomfortable. This means regularly asking difficult questions. What am I pretending not to know? What am I avoiding? Where am I living according to someone else's script? This practice requires distinguishing between our authentic desires and the desires we think we should have. Society, family, and culture all whisper or shout about who we should be, what we should want, how we should live. The person living authentically learns to separate these external voices from their internal compass. Embracing your own values. Living for yourself doesn't mean living selfishly. It means living from your own center rather than constantly seeking external validation. This requires identifying what truly matters to you, not what you've been told should matter. Your values might include creativity, adventure, service, solitude, connection, or justice. They might be conventional or unconventional, but they must be genuinely yours. The challenge lies in honoring these values even when they conflict with others' expectations. The introvert who stops apologizing for needing solitude. The person who chooses a modest lifestyle over climbing the corporate ladder because they value time over money. The individual who pursues an unconventional relationship structure because it aligns with their authentic nature. The courage to disappoint others. Perhaps the most difficult aspect of authentic living is accepting that you cannot live your truth without occasionally disappointing others. The fear of disappointment, rejection, or conflict keeps many people trapped in inauthentic lives. We say yes when we mean no, smile when we're angry, and pursue paths that please others while neglecting our own growth. Learning to disappoint others gracefully, not callously, but honestly, is a crucial skill for authentic living. This might mean setting boundaries with family members, changing career paths that no longer serve you, or ending relationships that have run their course. It requires accepting that being liked by everyone is impossible and that the approval of others is a poor substitute for self-respect. Practical steps toward authentic living. Start small, but start somewhere. Notice when you find yourself automatically agreeing or disagreeing without pausing to consider your genuine position. Pay attention to activities that energize you versus those that drain you. Observe when you feel most like yourself and when you feel like you're wearing a costume. Create space for solitude and reflection. Authentic living requires knowing yourself, and self-knowledge develops in quiet moments away from the influence of others. Journal, walk, meditate, or simply sit with your thoughts without immediately trying to fix or change them. Practice saying, "I don't know," when you don't know. "I need to think about that," when pressured to make quick decisions, and "that doesn't work for me," when something genuinely doesn't work for you. These simple phrases create space between stimulus and response, allowing your authentic self to emerge. The ongoing journey. Living authentically isn't a destination, but a practice, a daily choice to honor your truth while remaining open to growth and change. It requires accepting that you will make mistakes, that growth is sometimes messy, and that authentic living doesn't guarantee an easy life, just an honest one. The reward for this honesty is profound. A life that feels genuinely yours, relationships based on who you really are rather than who you pretend to be, and the deep satisfaction that comes from aligning your actions with your values. It's the difference between being the protagonist of your own story and playing a supporting role in someone else's script. In the end, the question isn't whether you deserve to live authentically. You do. The question is whether you're willing to do the uncomfortable work of discovering who you really are beneath the layers of expectation, habit, and fear, and then having the courage to live as that person in a world that may not always understand or approve. Introduction. Few struggles are more universal and more quietly corrosive than the struggle between self-deception and authenticity. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to tell themselves comforting stories, to disguise dissatisfaction as responsibility, or to frame conformity as wisdom. These stories protect us from the full weight of our freedom, but they also prevent us from living truly. To stop deceiving yourself is not simply to be more honest. It is to dismantle illusions so deeply woven into daily life that they often go unnoticed. It is to face the discomfort of freedom, to accept the risks of authenticity, and to live not as an imitation of others, but as an expression of one's own being. To live for yourself is not an act of selfishness, but of responsibility. The responsibility to live truthfully in the time allotted to you. The nature of self-deception. A protective strategy. Self-deception is rarely blatant. It often comes in the form of rationalizations that sound noble. I must stay in this job because it is responsible. I cannot leave this relationship because sacrifice is virtuous. Beneath these justifications often lies fear, the fear of uncertainty, of rejection, or of solitude. Seen in this light, self-deception is a strategy of self-preservation. It shields us from painful truths and allows us to maintain stability. But what protects us in the moment becomes a prison over time. The mask of normalcy. Self-deception frequently masquerades as normal life. People who live according to social expectations may appear successful in content, but inwardly they experience Kierkegaard's sickness unto death, the despair of not being oneself. This despair is not always dramatic. It often appears as boredom, restlessness, or a quiet sense that life is being lived on autopilot. The paradox. Philosophically, self-deception is paradoxical. To deceive oneself, one must both know and not know the truth. Sartre captured this in his idea of bad faith, in which people pretend not to know what they in fact do know. A person insists they are just a cog in the machine, while secretly knowing they are free to leave. This tension, knowing yet refusing to know, defines self-deception and makes it so difficult to escape. Philosophical perspectives on authenticity. Kierkegaard, the self in despair. For Kierkegaard, despair arises when we fail to become ourselves. Some lose themselves in the finite, career, routine, worldly success. Others lose themselves in the infinite, abstract dreams divorced from reality. Both are forms of flight from the difficult task of being a self. Authenticity demands confronting this tension directly, without fleeing into distraction or fantasy. Heidegger, living in the they. Heidegger described inauthentic existence as absorption in das Man, the they. In this state, one's values, ambitions, and even emotions are dictated by what they expect. Authenticity emerges when we confront our finitude, specifically, our mortality. To realize that life is finite is to recognize that no one else can live it for us. Sartre, condemned to be free. Sartre argued that human beings are condemned to be free. Every excuse, "I had no choice, I was compelled by duty," is an act of bad faith. To live authentically is to accept that even not choosing is itself a choice. Freedom is unavoidable, and with it comes the burden of responsibility. The psychological roots of self-deception. Philosophy reveals the structural patterns of self-deception, but psychology shows us its mechanisms. Cognitive dissonance allows us to reconcile contradictions by adjusting beliefs rather than confronting truth. Defense mechanisms such as denial, repression, and projection serve to protect the ego from painful realities. These mechanisms may be useful in moments of crisis, but they become dangerous when they form the foundation of daily life. Over time, self-deception becomes habitual. One forgets that the shield once used for protection has now become a cage. The courage to stop deceiving yourself. The act of seeing. The first step is simply to see. This is not casual reflection, but existential honesty. To admit that a career is hollow, that a relationship is dead, or that one's values are borrowed rather than chosen. These recognitions pierce through illusion. Once seen, they cannot be unseen. Enduring anxiety. Authenticity brings anxiety. Kierkegaard described this as the dizziness of freedom, the vertigo of realizing that anything is possible. Most people retreat into illusion rather than endure this dizziness. But anxiety is not a sign of failure. It is evidence of awakening. It signals the presence of real possibility, the leap into action. Clarity without action becomes another form of evasion. To stop deceiving oneself means not only recognizing the truth, but also acting upon it. Ending what is false, choosing what resonates, embracing risk. Freedom always carries uncertainty, but it is the only ground upon which an authentic life can be built. Living for yourself. Beyond selfishness. To live for yourself is often misunderstood as selfishness. In fact, it is its opposite. Selfishness seeks gratification without regard for truth. Living for yourself seeks fidelity to one's own being, even at personal cost. It is not rebellion against others, but independence from their dictates. Redefining success. Living for yourself requires redefining success. Society measures success externally: wealth, prestige, stability. But authentic success must be internal, the degree to which one's life resonates with one's deepest values. For some, it may mean artistic creation. For others, meaningful relationships. For others still, quiet integrity. What matters is not conformity to a model, but fidelity to oneself. Responsibility as freedom. Authentic living is not an escape from responsibility, but its deepest form. When one lives by borrowed scripts, responsibility can always be shifted onto tradition, family, or circumstance. But when one chooses authentically, there is no one else to blame. This weight is heavy, yet it is also dignifying. It is the burden and gift of freedom. Obstacles to authenticity. Expectation and approval. The most powerful obstacle is the expectation of others. Family, culture, and society demand conformity. To live authentically is to risk rejection, disappointment, or criticism. But the approval of the they cannot substitute for the integrity of one's own life. The fear of uncertainty. Uncertainty makes self-deception attractive. It is easier to cling to the familiar, even when it is hollow, than to face the unknown. But uncertainty is inseparable from freedom. Without it, we are secure but stagnant. The seduction of comfort. Comfort is perhaps the greatest danger. A life of moderate ease can conceal profound inauthenticity. Comfort lulls us into forgetting that existence is finite, that every moment spent in self-deception is a moment lost forever. Practices of authenticity. While authenticity cannot be reduced to technique, certain practices sustain it. Self-reflection, through journaling or meditation, exposes contradictions and hidden motives. Honest dialogue, with trusted others challenges rationalizations. Boundary setting allows one to say no to what contradicts one's values and yes to what aligns with them. Mindfulness of mortality sharpens awareness of life's finitude, reinforcing the urgency of authenticity. These practices are reminders, not formulas, that help resist the drift into illusion. Conclusion: to stop deceiving yourself and to start living for yourself is not a slogan, but a lifelong task. It requires courage to see uncomfortable truths, strength to bear the anxiety of freedom, and resolve to act upon what one sees. It is not a flight from responsibility, but its highest form, the responsibility to live one's own life rather than an imitation of another's. Self-deception offers safety, but safety purchased at the cost of vitality. Authenticity brings risk, but risk is the condition of a life worth living. Between illusion and truth, between conformity and authenticity, each person must choose. And while philosophers can illuminate the stakes, no one else can make the choice for you. Each day, you must decide whether to retreat into self-deception or to step into authenticity. For authenticity is not a final achievement, but a continual act of courage. The courage to stop deceiving yourself and to live, at last, as yourself.